Vedic Astrology. And thank you, all of you, for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our videos and Spotify, YouTube channels. And if you haven't subscribed to our videos or Spotify channels, please do, so that you can get our updates ASAP. And don't forget to press the bell icon. Today we have James with us in continuum with the video that we have previously. If you haven't watched that interesting video on Rahu Ketu, please do, so that you can enjoy this video more. So James, what do we do in continuum with the same topic of Rahu Ketu?
Okay. First of all, I want to mention that if anybody wants the Braha Sutras, it's on ebook at Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and Apple Books. If they want the hard copy, then it's at Amazon in 7 or 8 countries. Okay. So in the last video, we were talking about Rahu and Ketu, but I realized after we spoke that I want to make sure that people understand, you know, when I explain Ketu as being awareness and consciousness and the other world, that is the greatest benefit, really, because if a person is living in the material world, believing that they're going to get happiness and fulfillment from money and from career and from fame, it's never going to happen, because life is changeable. People are going to get sick. You're going to watch loved ones die, relationships. And there's never any fulfillment lasting in the material world. But Ketu is the spiritual world, the metaphysical world. That's where the happiness comes from, the being in touch with awareness and consciousness, which is who we are anyway. But I'm mentioning this because, you know, I was in that last video, I was trying to explain the benefits of Rahu and the benefits of Ketu. And so, you know, it's like the 12th house. People complain about the 12th house like it's terrible. Without the 12th house, there's no moksha. There's no enlightenment without it. Without Ketu, there's no intuition, psychic ability, being in touch with the absolute. So these are wonderful attributes, and they're not to be dreaded. Now, if a person comes to a Ketu dasha that is trying to make them spiritual, and they keep trying to go toward the material, that dasha may be difficult, because things may break down to try to, you know, move them to the spiritual world. So I wanted to mention one of the sutras in the book. So the book is 80% Jyotish, but there's a 10-20% Western astrological things, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and the tropical zodiac. There's a little bit of Western stuff in here. And there's one sutra about the North Node in the Western horoscope being the deciding factor. The deciding factor. So South Node is Ketu, North Node is Rahu. But in the Western system, they're not two halves of a Rakshasa. The South Node is representing what you've learned in past lives, and the North Node is telling you what you're going toward in this life. So in horoscopes, you know, mainly when I'm looking at charts, I'm looking at the Hindu Vedic for the karma, how the life is actually going to be. And I'm looking at the Western, a little bit more psychological, behavioral. And oftentimes the Hindu Vedic chart will be clear, and I'll know what's going on in the person's life, what their life is going to be about. But sometimes there's too much confusion. Sometimes they go in 2 or 3 very specific directions. Whenever that happens, I mean, I'm always going to look, after I look at the Hindu Vedic, I go straight to the Western. But in the cases that are a little bit confusing, or where there's 2 or 3 areas that are very, very strong, then when I go straight to the Western horoscope, and I go straight to the North Node. If that North Node is in the 5th house of the Western, it's pointing to the arts and creativity. If the Vedic chart was indicating, say, health and healing, as well as the arts, as well as something else, and I see that North Node in the Western, that they're going toward creativity and the arts, then I know that the Hindu Vedic is likely to, it's going to push it over the top for that area. like that. If the horoscope in the Hindu Vedic is all about the second house, which could be money or it could be education and teaching. If I then go to the Western horoscope and the North Node's in Gemini, or if the North Node is in the third house of the Western, then I know that Hindu Vedic second house is not about money. It's about writing and teaching and communications. So that's called the deciding factor. It is critical for me, critical. So, okay, enough about that sutra. There's 216.
That's a very beautiful sutra that you've put on board, because when we are amalgamating both the systems, we are getting much more and a great insight than we could even think about. That's really beautiful to understand.
You know, the funny thing is I spent so much time doing readings and really not putting, you know, when I update the ancient Hindu astrology book, I updated the planets and the houses and things, but there's so many things that are just in the daily practice that never get put down in writing. That's why I love this book, but that's why it makes me sad. There's no more sutras coming up. Well, there could be a few, but not a lot. Okay, so the planets near the nodes, planetary conjunctions with the nodes. So we'll start with Ketu because planets near Ketu have a huge effect. Planets near Rahu do not, except for what I mentioned
in the last,
you know, if Venus is near the North Node, the person can go toward the arts, but planets near Ketu are much more intense. So
just to interrupt here and ask you, James, do you just take them by the degrees or do you take them by signs? Say somebody can have their Ketu in, somebody can have their Ketu in 10 degrees in Taurus, and they can have their Jupiter somewhere around 29 degrees in Aries. So do you take them to be very close by, or?
Oh, okay, so let's say that they're in the same sign, okay?
Right.
If a planet, so there's a big difference between Venus being 10 degrees away from Ketu and Venus being 20 degrees away from Ketu. Venus, and then there's a big difference when Venus is within 2 degrees of Ketu. The degrees are critical.
Yes, you've always mentioned that. So that's the reason I put it here.
I don't mind if they're in different signs, but if they're in different signs, they need to be close. They need to be 7-8 degrees. If a planet is, say, you know, 20 degrees of Taurus, and then Ketu is, say, you know, 3 or 4 degrees of Gemini, I'm really not going to mention it.
Yes.
But if Ketu is 25 degrees of Taurus, and then Ketu is you know, 3 degrees. I mean, if it's 7-8 degrees, I don't care whether it's in different signs or not. But I'm talking, what I'm going to describe now is when the planets are very close.
Right.
Very close. So the sun being with Ketu. The sun being with Ketu is not going to help the father. The father could be weird or strange, or the father could be spiritual or metaphysical. The sun being near Ketu is not going to help the confidence at all. The sun is the Atma, the soul, it's the character, it's the willpower and the confidence. And Ketu is the other world. So it puts the confidence off in another world. It doesn't help. It harms the father. It harms the confidence. Of course, it'll make the person have an openness to spiritual metaphysical tendencies. Okay, but that's not a real, I've seen the sun near Ketu without having overly dramatic effects so much as others. Take the moon. The moon with Ketu is the most typical feature of professional psychics and astrologers, but more psychics. So there's 2 mental planets. The moon is common sense and memory, and Mercury is the intellect. So the thing about the thing about this is that if a person's got Moon or Mercury next to Ketu, the mind is going to waver, okay? But there's a difference between the way Mercury does it and the way the Moon does it. The Moon is the mind, and the person's mind goes back and forth and back and forth, and it wavers. But it makes the personality a little bit strange or weird, whereas Mercury will not. In other words, when the Moon is near Ketu, the person's mind is on the other plane picking. They may be talking about something and explaining something, but their feelings, the Moon is the feelings, and the feelings are partly in the world and partly in the other plane of existence. And when they're in the other plane of existence, the person is picking up, they're picking up intuitively things that are going on, psychically, intuitively. The thing about the Moon next to Ketu is that the whole lifetime is, and it depends how close it is, but the closer it gets, people will look at someone who has the Moon within 3-4 degrees of Ketu, and they'll say, yeah, they're weird. Isn't that person weird? They're like, back and forth, and a little bit strange, a little bit weird. They're psychic. They're very, very psychic, but they're not grounded so much, right? They're partly spiritual. Wearing a pearl in that case is extremely important. Anything that person can do to become more practical and grounded, because the Moon is the most important, much more than the Sun. It represents you, your emotional well-being. How is your emotional well-being supposed to be comfortable when it's going back and forth and back and forth to the other world and this world?
Yeah, so you're neither here nor there.
Yeah. Well, it's both. It's over there, now it's over here. Over there. So it can be
Tiring.
It can be
draining.
What? Draining.
Draining.
Yeah. Yeah, but it can be uncomfortable to be around those people. But it's whether how intense the aspect is, and it's also what else is going on in the horoscope. Okay. That's not going to help the mother. And the mother could be alcoholic, illusion, deception, drugs, alcohol. It's like the Moon being near Neptune. It's like the Moon being near Neptune. And I have found that for some reason, it seems the Moon conjunct Ketu, to me, seems to affect the person's mother more than the Sun. More than the Sun being with Ketu affects the father. It doesn't affect the father as much. Moon conjunct Ketu, the mother always has some weird, strange Neptunian characteristics, like that. But that person will be very connected to the other world. Then you take Mercury next to Ketu. Mercury next to Ketu is, first of all, Ketu is going to benefit by being near Moon. Ketu is going to benefit tremendously by being near Mercury, because then it's like Ketu in Virgo, which is the best. So Ketu with Mercury, right away, I know the person's extremely spiritual, metaphysical, because Ketu is really strong now. But the Mercury is going to have problems. Whatever Mercury rules in the chart's going to have problems. And there's no question, the mind is in this world and that world. With the Moon, it's the mind and the emotions. It's everything back and forth. With Mercury, it's just the mind. The mind goes back and forth, So the confidence of the mind, with Mercury, it's the confidence of the mind. Like the person will start saying something and then stop and hold back. They'll start saying something and stop, because the confidence isn't there for Mercury. It's like in water. It's like that. But Ketu benefits more than anything next to Ketu.
Excuse me, you said Mercury.
Ketu benefits more than anything by being near Mercury. Sorry. Yeah. Ketu Mars is really odd, okay? Because normally any planet near Ketu, what I say to people is it's swallowed up into a black hole. It's like that planet is swallowed in a black hole. You can't get a hold of it. It's weird, it's strange, etc. So why, if that's the case, do people that have Mars Ketu, why do they fight? Why do presidents with Mars Ketu get into wars more often than the others? I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you from experience, Mars is one of the planets that Mars and Saturn sometimes can survive being near Ketu. Mars's aggressiveness definitely survives, probably gets even stronger next to Ketu. I have no idea why. It's still a black hole. But the Mars Ketu person may have trouble with the bloodstream or the muscles. And the house that holds Mars Ketu, it better be an Upachaya, 3, 6, 10, or 11, or it's going to be devastated. Just because they are two malefics. But Mars does not usually seem to get that hurt by being near Ketu. The houses that Mars rules will be very hurt if it's close to Ketu, like that. Venus Ketu is one you really don't want to have, because the love experiences will be weird and strange, and it will be a case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just the luck will be completely against you. The experiences will be strange. It's not a very good feature for Venus. Ketu becomes wonderful, psychic, metaphysical, all that spiritual stuff is great. But Venus, the love experiences are just going to be so weird and so strange. And you would definitely have to watch out for illusion, deception, confusion. It's like having Venus near Neptune. The partner could be alcoholic or drug addicted or things like that. The Venus Ketu is really fascinating for film. On one hand, Venus is the planet of the arts and is hurt by being near Ketu, but Ketu is film and photography, and being next to Venus, it is extremely good. And if a person has several benefics, Moon, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Moon, Jupiter, 2 or 3 benefics near to Ketu, the person may do very well with oil or gas investments, and film and photography. Those things will be very strong when there's benefics near Ketu. Jupiter near Ketu, tremendous for psychic, metaphysical, astrological, terrible for religion, philosophy, and gurus. There could be illusion, deception with gurus. There could be problems with liver, gallbladder, spleen. Venus with Ketu could be problems with the kidneys and the throat, thyroid, and reproductive system. But the Jupiter Ketu will be very nice for Ketu. Saturn Ketu, these are 2 first-class malefics. You better have it in an Upachaya house. And even in the Upachayas, if it's in the 3rd, it's going to hurt the younger sibling. If it's in the 11th, it's going to hurt the eldest sibling. But aside from that, most of the rest of the 3rd, 3, 6, 10, and 11, they can benefit. I would say maybe half of the people that I see with Saturn Ketu have no sense of responsibility. They just can't get near being disciplined or responsible, but not all. So I have the number one sutra. The number one sutra in the book is follow the 7 and 10 rule. If it doesn't work 7 out of 10 times, don't use it. Yeah. But Saturn Ketu, I don't know, it's 50-50. Half the people, you start talking to them and you realize, yeah, their lives are problematic because they have no sense of discipline and responsibility. But then there's another half where they have Saturn Ketu and they don't have a problem with it. I don't know why. It's like Mars Ketu. I don't know why Mars can survive it. But a lot of times Saturn will survive the Ketu. Saturn Ketu can be good for oil and gas also. Saturn is a career planet. It's the, there's, in the books, you'll see 5 or 6 different karakas for the 10th house, which is ridiculous. How many indicators for a career? It's the same as saying, look at the whole chart, but really, no doubt about it, Saturn is the #1 karaka for career. So if Saturn is with Ketu, you got to think about film photography or oil, gas, like that. So as far as the Rahu ones, I really don't have anything to say specifically about each planet, except that, well, the Sun Rahu, I should say, if it's close. And again, this is not absolute, but in the cases where people are megalomaniacs, where they just have these huge egos, a lot of times that'll be the Sun with Rahu, but not always. It's not always. So it's one of those things. But sometimes that Sun Rahu, you'll see a huge, just huge ego. If they go toward leadership, it's going to go very well with Sun Rahu. Of course, it depends on where it's placed, but it's like that. Moon Rahu, I think there's really nothing better than Moon Rahu for being able to affect the masses, the public. The moon is the masses, the moon is the public. And it's really interesting the way that works, that, the moon is the emotions. And if some statement gets made into the public by the press or by a magazine, if that statement is false, but it goes out to the public, you can never get it back. You can never take it back. It doesn't matter how many times the public will, or the press will try to say, well, that wasn't really, it doesn't matter. It's out there. It's like in politics to this day, when they talk, the Republicans will talk about Abraham Lincoln being a Republican, but Republican back then meant the liberals. You can't take it back. They don't even try anymore. They just say, yeah, he was a Republican, and that's it. So because whatever goes out to the public, why? Because the public is not Mercury. If the public was Mercury, then when a retraction would come, the people would say, oh, no, that's not the case. But when it goes to the moon, it goes to the emotions. It just goes to the emotions. And these actors, they sue these rag magazines that just print just horrible rumors. There's nothing they can do. People believe them for 50 years. That's the moon. It's the emotions. So if the moon is with Rahu, I don't think there's anything better than Moon Rahu for affecting the public, especially, of course, if it's going to be in a 10th house or, something prominent. Rahu Mercury, all I would say about Rahu Mercury is, aside from the fact that anything communicative is going to go, media is going to go very well, Rahu is going to be, whatever house it's in, it's going to be phenomenally strong. It's going to, if it's in the 4th house, it's going to be tremendous for the mother. 5th house, tremendous for children, because Rahu and Ketu love Mercury. They love Virgo. Rahu Jupiter, again, if you do anything Jupiterian, if you want to be a guru or a spiritual teacher, that'll go well. Jupiter might get hurt. If you have Jupiter next to Rahu, you might get a guru that is overpowering or too worldly, or something like that. And Rahu Saturn, I think, is you better watch. If Saturn is near Rahu, that Rahu is going to be a really lousy dasha, or bhukti. It's not going to be very. And it's the same with Rahu or Ketu. If they're near Mars or if they're near Ketu, that that Rahu or that Ketu is not going to do well in the dasha bhuktis. It'll be irritated. If it's Mars, it'll be irritated and with friction. If Rahu is with Saturn and you're in a Rahu dasha, it's going to be very hard to accomplish anything, to get things done. Saturn's going to restrict that Rahu.
Moving out.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful, beautifully said about all the planets, James, and their conjunction coming from your practical experience of 7-10 principle. Do read the book, do apply the sutras there, because they come with a wealth of experience. And these sessions in Rahu Ketu have been phenomenal. Try to understand them and see how they work in your charts. Don't forget to write into us and let us know how you found this video. Yes, James.
And there's a sutra in the book, in the section on Rahu and Ketu. Do the world a favor and don't spread the idea that Rahu and Ketu are any worse than any other malefic planet. It's a superstition. I mean, because, if I had to choose one benefic that could be phenomenal in my chart, and if I had to choose one malefic that would be phenomenal in the chart, for the worldly existence, I would want a wonderful Rahu. Now I'm speaking, this is, of course, a person's opinion. I mean, my best planet is Saturn, and I love having this wonderful Saturn. It gets me so much. But if I was just thinking, I'm going to start a new lifetime and I want to have a powerful life in the world, I would say, give me the best Rahu. For example, Rahu in Virgo, aspected by Mercury. Rahu in Virgo, aspected by Mercury. Mercury is not only aspecting Rahu, it's aspecting Rahu in
it's sign of
exaltation. So when you think of Al Pacino, okay, he has Rahu in the third house, the house of music, dance, and drama, and the house of willpower. And there's this wonderful quote that Sean Penn said about Al Pacino. He said, most of us actors, when we're young, we go on stage and we get bitten by the acting bug. But Al got bitten by the acting monster. That's because that's how powerful Rahu can be. In his case, it's in the house of acting. So if I had one malefic that I would want to be strong, it would be Rahu. It wouldn't be Mars. Mars is great. It gives you mechanical, technical skills. And Mars, if it's really well placed, gives you discipline. Like if you have Mars in Capricorn, you can control your desires. Most people cannot control their desires. But if Mars is in Capricorn, exalted, they can. That's quite wonderful. But if I wanted worldly power, it would be Rahu. And for a benefic, they're all good. A wonderful Jupiter is great, and a wonderful Mercury is great. But I would take Venus. I would love to have the most wonderful Venus, because when I see charts of people that have a really spectacular Venus, there's something about the sweetness. And, it's like when I was a little kid, I remember this, when I was a little kid, I used to have these dreams. I'd be, I was like 3-4 years old, and I would dream that suddenly I found all this money. Oh my God, it was, and it's total illusion. It's totally ridiculous. But there's a sweetness to Venus. When Venus, like, I don't know, if you have to live in the world, which is a crazy place to live, because the whole thing's not even real. But if you have to live in the world, what I would love to have is, the money and the love and the sweetness and the happiness, as opposed to, Mercury, which is great intellect and communications, or Jupiter, which is great religion. Venus is like so worldly sweet.
We are ending today with a happy note and a Venetian note at that. Do write into us and let us know how you found this video. Till we meet with you again, stay safe. Thank you so much.
Hit the bell icon for fresh updates. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on the videos, and
please subscribe to our channel.